Why are we having such a difficult time raising up warriors versus whatever? And I'm saying that in respect to anybody who puts on the uniform. How does this happen?
Jim, there's a couple of things. One is that 73% of the people within the age that they could be drafted in the military cannot meet the entrance standards into the military without a waiver. Obesity is an enormous problem. Drug use is a big problem. Diabetes is a big problem. Failure to complete a high school education is a problem. 73%, which means...
we've lowered the bar, is what you're saying.
That's exactly what we are. And we're only recruiting out of 23% of the male and female populations in America.
Well, General Boykin, you are considered a dear friend of our family, and you and I came together about the time I became a grandfather, and you kind of saw all that happen, and held my eldest grandson in your hands while we were sharing or in your arms while we were sharing some Mexican food together in Denver, Colorado. I've been following your work and your ministry for a long time, and General Jerry Boykin is an American hero, and I would just like to ask if you would introduce yourself to our listeners, maybe talk about your military career, and all the way to what are you doing today? What are you up to today? Why don't we start with that and lay a foundation, then we'll get into some of the world events that we want to talk about.
Yeah, I'd be happy to start there, Jim, and thank you for having me on the program. And you are I will say an old and dear friend, old meaning I've known you for a long time.
Yes, sir.
No disparaging remark. But that said, I went to Virginia Tech on a football scholarship, and I was in the Corps of Cadets there. And when I graduated from there in 1970, I went straight into the military. Into the U.S. Army, where I was an infantry officer, and then I went through my initial schooling and then off to Texas, of all places.
Mm-hmm. Where I'm at now.
Far from where you are, I was at Fort Hood, Texas.
Okay, yes, sir.
And then I got sent to Southeast Asia, and I was there I was actually in Vietnam with the Koreans. I was an advisor to the Koreans there. But after I came back, I had tours with several divisions, the 101st Airborne and the 24th Infantry Division. And then I got a call one day as a first lieutenant to see if I wanted to volunteer for a new unit being put together called the 1st Ranger Battalion. And so, of course, I jumped on that opportunity, and I went off and helped them form the 1st Ranger Battalion, and then ultimately, after having been in the Ranger Battalion and then commanded a company and so forth, I was training Rangers down at Eglin Air Force Base, and I got a call one day that said, "We're putting together a new secret unit, and we'd like for you to volunteer for this, and we can't tell you much about it except that it's going to be the toughest thing you've ever done."
Oh, my.
We're going to put you through a 30-day trial, and if you make it through that, then we'll ask you then to volunteer for an assignment. Well, I didn't know it, but it was the Delta Force. It was being formed at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and I was blessed enough to make it through that.
How old were you then, General?
I was 29 years old when I went through that.
I'm just trying to get a picture of you at that day, 29 years old, and backing up a little bit further. What position did you play in football, out of curiosity?
Yeah, I was a guard. I was a defensive guard at Virginia Tech, even though I had been recruited out of high school as a fullback.
Oh, wow.
And and when I got there, they said, "How did you ever play fullback as slow as you are?" So that was the end of my running back days, and they put me on the line. But
That's
I,
great.
nonetheless, I got an education out of it. So that was really
Absolutely.
important.
Absolutely. You left off at the Delta Force. I'll let you continue from
Yeah,
there.
well, I wound up spending a total of 13 years in the Delta Force, and part of that was 2 years that I actually commanded the Delta Force.
Hmm.
Prior to that, I had commanded subunits within the Delta Force, and then I went off and did a tour at the CIA. My first job as a brigadier general was with the CIA. So I spent a couple of years with the CIA, learned a lot, really enjoyed my time with them, great people. And then um, I went off to Europe during the Balkans War to chase down the war criminals over in Europe that
Hmm.
was part of the Dayton Accords, as they were called, which was the treaty that was signed between the warring factions there. And when I came back from that, I had the good fortune of getting my second star and being the commander of all of the Army's Green Berets. When I left there, I went to the Special Warfare School and trained all the Army's Green Berets,
Hmm.
and then my final assignment in the military was that I was in the George W. Bush administration. I was the Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence, and Donald Rumsfeld was the Secretary of Defense at that time, and it was a privilege to work for him. He was a good man. He a little cantankerous sometimes, but nonetheless, he was a good man. And then I retired in 2007, and I immediately moved into South Central Virginia, where I went to work as a professor of leadership at a men's college named Hampden-Sydney College. It's the 10th oldest college in America, as a matter of fact. It was founded in part by Patrick Henry.
Wow.
And so I taught leadership and taught intelligence as well there for about 10 years.
How much does the military brass? It sounds like what you're saying is that in our checks and balances, that the men and women who run our military, to some extent, have their hands tied as to where the culture of the military is going, or what's your assessment of that? Because it just seems to be contradictory to the force itself, to be, in other words, to be a puppet. But then again, now that I'm thinking out loud, I guess militaries all over the country in some ways can be puppets to the dictator, but this is not a dictatorship. So what is going on? Why are we having such a difficult time raising up warriors versus whatever? And I'm saying that in respect to anybody who puts on the uniform. But how does this happen?
Jim, there's a couple of things. One is that 73% of the people within the age that they could be drafted military cannot meet the entrance standards into the military without a waiver. Obesity is an enormous problem. Drug use is a big problem. Diabetes is a big problem. Failure to complete high school education is a problem. 73%, which means
we've lowered the bar, is what you're saying.
That's exactly what we are. And we're only recruiting out of 23% of the male and female populations in America. And then the final thing though is this vaccine that these young men and women, some of which have truly deeply held religious objections to taking the vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
They're being bullied.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you story after story of the way the chain of command has bullied these people. And then if they don't take it, they're being put out.
Mm-hmm.
So you have people in the military that are looking around saying, I'm not going to war with a chain of command like this that will treat me like this in peacetime.
Mm-hmm.
And they're leaving. I've talked to so many soldiers, primarily soldiers, but I've talked to other services too. People are saying, I'm done with this military. This is not what I expected. It's not why I came here. I've done my part. I'm getting out. And then others, particularly moms and dads all over the country, that are saying, I just don't want my son or daughter to go in the military now, because they have to check their faith at the door.
Mm-hmm.
Only people that have been given waivers, and I think it may be down in single digits, to be honest with you, for religious reasons, are people that were already being processed out of the military. They had decided to leave the military when their enlistment was up, or they had disciplinary problems, so they were being put out for disciplinary reasons. But the fact that they're being bullied by the same people that are expected to lead them in combat. And Jim, just on the practical side, this is the healthiest cohort of people in the United States today. I mean, these are young,
Right,
in shape, fit people, well fed, and well acclimated to hardship. And the fact that we would force them out of the military rather than allow them not to take a vaccine that they don't want for legitimate reasons is just unbelievable.
all right. Well, I'll tell you what you've shared is troubling to me. You said on the top of this subject, when when you digress to the war going on with Russia, and you mentioned that cohesion and purpose,
Right.
or I'm going to call them secret weapons, cohesion and purpose. And so the Ukrainians are fighting with those two secret weapons. And when you have described the situation going on in our military, several things go on in my mind. One of them is it sounds like we have a war of values going on inside our military. And of course, we have to follow that up to the chain of the guys wearing the suits and the gals wearing the suits. But it just reminds me of Jesus' words that a house divided against itself will not stand. And that's what's scary, for me, because you just made it really clear. Here's the two key things that wins wars, and then here's what we're fighting about. How in the world can we go to war if we need to go to war when we're fighting over bathrooms, when we're fighting over those kinds of things, when we've lowered the bar so much to where what are we doing? What's the requirement of running a mile? Is it my speed now, where if they can run a mile in 10 minutes they're in? I mean, what's going on? That's scary. It's scary.